Minister, I touched on this issue earlier. So a company applied for a mussel farm licence in Kinsale Harbour during January 2019 and the public information process followed. But then a few weeks ago, another public notice appeared in local publications stating that there was an error in the previous notice, including ambiguous language around people or groups resubmitted objections. Can you clarify the status of the public consultation process for this application? Because you talk about the process being so foolproof and thought out, but Minister, in relation to the last one, the department actually rejected that licence and then it was appealed and granted based on assessments done by the company, not the department.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Cairns. The Department considers all applications for aquaculture licence in accordance with the provisions of the 1997 Fisheries Amendment Act and the 1933 Foreshore Act and applicable national and EU legislation. That licensing process involves then consultation with a wide range of scientific and technical advisors, as well as the various statutory consultees, as we discussed, and provides for a period of public consultation. In addition, the legislation and governing aquaculture provides governing it provides for an appeals mechanism, and appeals against licence decisions are a matter for the Aquaculture Licences Appeal Board, which is an independent statutory body, independent of myself. So in accordance with that applicable legislation, the statutory and public consultation phase in respect of the application referred to is now concluded. Every effort is being made to expedite the determination in respect of this application, having regard to the complexities involved. And as this licence application is under active consideration as part of a statutory process, it would not be appropriate to comment further on this matter at the moment. Thank you.
We have two interconnected issues here, Minister. Firstly, we have another aquaculture project in a heavily used and important bay, this time adjacent to one of Ireland's premier tourist destinations. There's considerable concern around the environmental impact and the lack of clarity on the safeguards that may be put in place. Secondly, there's confusion over the second public notice. In particular, the language around resubmitting objections was unclear to the general public, who were the intended audience. With this in mind, I think that the objection period should be reopened both to allow public consultation in the fullest sense and to remove uncertainty which would inevitably lead to appeals on this decision. The community have genuine issues with the potential impacts on their local environment, and crucially, they have a right to be properly heard in relation to these public consultations.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
So, Deputy Cairns, obviously as Minister, my role is a policy one, putting in place the legislation around this, and then the actual process of dealing with the applications is one which is the Independent Appeals Licensing Board is statutorily independent on. So it's not something I can get involved in one way or another on particular cases. Obviously, you have the opportunity to make your views known in relation to that, but it is a matter that should be addressed to ALAB as opposed to the Minister, and just isn't appropriate for me to get into that space of being involved in a case that's under consideration by ALAB, Deputy.
Cairns.
Minister, given the unique situation where a few weeks ago, after, first of all it went in January 2019, then a few weeks ago they put in a new notice that was completely unclear. The language was unambiguous, nobody could understand what it meant. I'm asking that you'd reconsider it. I've outlined the flawed process and echoed the concerns raised by constituents. I'd ask that you'd act in good faith and accept their issues to follow for another public consultation, which is unambiguous in its call for any submissions. It also highlights my earlier comments around dysfunctional licensing system, which needs significant reform. We referenced the 2017 review of the aquaculture licensing system as identifying delays, but it also identified the need for more stringent enforcement proceedings for non-compliance with licence conditions. What are you doing to address this and to address the cases where licence conditions are being breached? Like, there can't be situations where the licensing system is unclear and changes randomly to suit businesses, and the fact that the one in Bantry was refused by the department, appealed and granted based on assessments done by the company, not by the EPA and not by the department itself. There has to be more consistency in the licensing process. So I'm asking you to please act in good faith in relation to these issues, because there will be appeals, and that's a really expensive process. It's unfair on communities to have to take this up again.
Thank you. Minister, to conclude.
So listen, obviously the nature of a licensing process and of an appeals process, Deputy Cairns, is that the appeals body has the opportunity to overturn as well as agree with the decision that was made initially. So, and that's a matter for them to consider in accordance with the legislation, likewise. I mean, and the legislation is very, very comprehensive, taking into account all environmental considerations and potential impacts of an application. I know that the particular application that you're referring to is with ALAB, is under their consideration, so it's a matter entirely for them at the moment. But I think, it would be unfair to assume that, an appeals body can only make a decision in one direction. The key thing is, in terms of every decision that they assess and look at, that they do so in detail, they do so in a way that fully assesses the law, all the requirements on it, and then come to a decision that is consistent with those laws and regulations. And that's the approach that is required, and that's the approach that, in terms of the department's initial decision and the appeals body and ALAB, that they have to follow as well.